Getting withdrawal symptoms from last week's bumper Tynwald sitting? Well, this evening's agenda is just the answer. All the Tynwald highlights we couldn't squeeze into Sunday's perspective, including education, the post office, a bit more on the National Insurance Fund, and a few bonus questions thrown in too. First, Education Minister Daphne Kane had to fend off some less than favourable comments when she moved her departmental plan. It is fair to say that your first attempt to deliver a department plan through Tynwald received a lot of attention from your colleagues.
Yes, and I think that's right. I'm delighted that it was approved, or the department plan was received by Tynwald, and it did get majority support. And quite rightly, education is fundamental to everything we're trying to achieve in the island plan, and it should receive a lot of attention. And I very much welcome the feedback of members, and also, potentially some ideas for the future.
One of the concerns that's often expressed in relation to the government plan and generally to the way in which government comms work in relation to the big issues is education rarely seems to get much of a mention. Is that fair, do you think? Do you think members are right to be a little bit concerned that there's no key sort of objectives and goals there that we should be looking to, or would you say that those objectives and goals are all there, it's just they're not looking hard enough?
No, I think they are there. I think I said there was 75 different actions in the previous plan, and we've delivered on the vast majority of them. All those delivered actions support various policies of the department and for us to achieve the strategic priorities. So I suppose you could say no news is good news when everything is diligently working away in the background. It's a bit like the swan. But there is so much going on behind the scenes, and I did particularly want to say, fantastic job that the 2,518 staff working for DESC in the various divisions are delivering for children and young people of this island, particularly across sport, but actually all, lifelong education, all the various schemes and the policies, and everything we do is actually future I was going to say horizon scanning. We are making the best use of technology. We're investigating AI and other technological solutions to improve access to education. Inclusive education policy is fundamental and will be rolled out over the next 12 months. And there are other things that I highlighted. There was a very comprehensive school meals review that looked at all aspects of its provision, including the school's catering equipment and everything. I'm hoping that report will be published as soon as we are able to, within the resources we've got, make it ready for publication. But I did announce that we need a small, focused school meals review to ensure that we have the best school meals provision in our primary schools. Need to engage with students and parents to get their feedback as to what the meals choices would be. I mean, mine is wanting to reduce the ultra-processed food, increase the locally produced food, and decrease the food waste. And I'm working with DEFA hopefully on that for the future. But that's one tiny thing that perhaps I'm bringing, and I was the one who triggered, I think in July last year, I was asking about school meals review to the previous minister. All this takes time because of the large volume of work that is ongoing in so many areas of the department to deliver lifelong learning to the Isle of Man.
And of course, one of the big areas as well, which the department has been concerned about, I think, for 2 or 3 years, but hasn't had necessarily the funding that it needed, was in relation to children with additional educational needs. Is there any movement in relation to that?
The inclusive education policy outlines the principles and the arrangements that drive the education system on the island. It's there to ensure that every learner has the opportunity to access education based on age, aptitude and ability. The policy that's to be rolled out over the next 12 months has a clear implementation plan with milestones for the key actions, and this is coming out over the next 12 months. We are very conscious. We take Equality Act very seriously. And just in terms of enabling every child, no matter what their challenges are, to be able to access the core curriculum, that's what this is about. And it's putting in the tools that they need to be able to access the curriculum and achieve the best they can do in school and in their future careers.
And there was one significant key achievement that you were keen to highlight in the debate.
Yes, that was over alternative provision. Following the implementation of outreach teams in secondary school, these teams whose key focus is to reintegrate and support students who struggle to maintain full-time education, the department has opened an alternative provision centre for the students who are unable to attend school, and that's going to offer a more tailored educational experience designed to meet the specific needs. It may include specialised programmes focusing on individual learning styles, even therapeutic support and flexible scheduling. And I suppose it is an enhancement to the facilities the Isle of Man's had in the past, but it also builds on the alternative provision centres within schools, and this is another way of supporting young people to enable them to provide learning to them, and also hopefully to enable them to achieve their potential. But it's I'm very pleased that it's come on. It's for early days as yet, small numbers, but I think that is welcome both in the educational settings in the school, and also for this more targeted support to support young people who've got challenges that most people would never understand, and we see that across. But there's also other elements that the department is bringing online, and that includes enabling, investigating the use of technology. I mean, AI was discussed a lot in the debate today, but really targeted support, whether it's additional education needs or, as I said, alternative provision centre. It is really the department gearing up and adapting to meet the needs of all learners on this island and supporting them as best we can within the resources that we have.
MHK for Garth, Daphne Kane. Post Office Chairman Stu Peters received a slightly less critical assessment of his annual plan. Your board's plan was put to Tynwald. There wasn't an awful lot of criticism or ripping the report to pieces, so that must have been pleasing.
Yeah, it was very reassuring. I would like to think that the fact that I've answered an awful lot of questions in Keys and Tynwald over the last 2 years about the Post Office, I think people realise now, more than ever, what we're trying to achieve and what the limitations are to what we can do. I thought all the contributions were quite good today, even the ones that were taking the mickey out of me for not being a particular eco-zealot.
I mean, one of the problems, I suppose, and certainly this was something I found when I was in Tynwald, is you tend to focus, if you are contributing to a debate and you're not the mover of the debate, you tend to focus on the negative stuff, because the positive stuff, you think, well, that's what we expect the department or the board, the post office in this case, to do. But yeah, I mean, generally speaking, the comments were quite favourable. There was a kind of a stop reinventing the wheel comment. I think it was from Chris Thomas, basically that we've looked into in the past services being delivered through the post office. It's not really working in terms of government services being delivered through the post office, and it seems a bit of a waste of time to try and keep looking at that.
Well, I thanked Chris Thomas for his comments, and as a former chairman of the post office, he understands the challenges there, and he's got a lot of institutional memory of things that have been suggested by members in the past, looked at and sort of thrown back as like that really isn't something that either we can do or that we should do. So I thought his comments were very pragmatic, actually, and very welcome.
Because, of course, it sounds like a really good idea. Yes, this can be the front of house, the public office. You can have one in Port Eyre and one in Castletown, one in Peel, one in Ramsey, wherever it may be, so that people don't have to go into Douglas to get the advice. But, of course, the people that they go into Douglas to get the advice from tend to be experts who know their field exceptionally well, and with the best will in the world, sub-postmasters cannot be experts on everything.
Sub-postmasters are great, and they know their community and they know their customers, which is fine. But a point that I tried to make to members is that the post office is a commercial operation, and whilst we've got a wonderful position within the community, we're not a community service as such. To sound crass about it, if there's a penny to be turned on being a local service, then we'll do it. But we can't afford to run social services from post offices unless there's a return for it, and frankly there isn't. With the withdrawal of my card and the eventual, not sure when yet, withdrawal of vehicle licensing, then the two of the three pillars of the post office's income, or the sub postmaster's income, have been removed, and we've just got to relook at how we do things. We're very minded, because we are socially aware, that we need to do something. But the whole world is changing, and people who say they don't like technology like it when it suits them. And so we're trying to come up with things that it's all about convenience these days. People don't want to trudge necessarily to a sub-post office to send a parcel. So if we can offer a service whereby we'll collect it from your doorstep even, then people are quite keen on that kind of thing. But it's maintaining a balance. It's the same in all areas of life, isn't it? We're trying to maintain some sort of a balance, be proactive about what we're doing in the future, but also cognizant of our past.
MHK for Middle, Stu Peters there. Chris Thomas took the unusual step of asking a question of Tynwald President Lawrence Skelly. What's your particular gripe with the President?
Well, no, it isn't a gripe, actually. I invited a statement, and I got the statement, and full credit to Mr. President for doing that. I'm actually doing the same thing to Mr. Speaker next week, because it's important that the President and the Speaker speak with one voice. The reason why it's particularly important in the context of the question I asked today was I asked about the right to make a personal statement when a minister or a departmental member steps down from that role. And as a chief minister is now elected in the House of Keys, you would have thought, and as the chief minister appoints ministers, you'd have thought it's best placed to make those statements in the House of Keys. I wasn't actually allowed to make one when I stood down as a minister because I wasn't prepared to accept the rules, which were that I had to get my speech had to be apolitical because the chief minister couldn't respond, and secondly I had to get it approved in advance as being apolitical. So I just wanted a clear statement. Mr. President gave a good answer today, which is that the Standing Orders Committee should now consider this matter. I suggested Erskine May, which is a UK document about procedure that allows for a minister to make a statement without approval in advance of the presiding officer, and I hope that's what we end up with.
So are you then suggesting that perhaps the President hasn't dealt fairly with this? Because it's fair to say that Laurie Hooper's resignation speech, it certainly felt like it was political to me.
Well, that's right. I was surprised to learn today that Mr. President had approved that speech from Laurie Hooper, the former minister. Mine was over a year ago now, and it was actually Mr. Speaker that I asked to make a personal statement when I was asked to stand down as Minister of Infrastructure, and we agreed that I wouldn't make one because I wasn't prepared for Mr. Speaker to decide whether or not I was being too political in my remarks. So I spoke outside Tynwald, and I also asked questions. So it became, the Chief Minister wanted the message to be that he got rid of me to speed up change in the Department of Infrastructure. I wanted to make sure that the public understood that I was gone because I didn't agree with the Chief Minister in terms of the Kroger licence.
Then, if we move on, you also had a contribution in relation to the National Insurance Fund debate, and I think it was, I think the Treasury Minister might have accused you of scaremongering. Was that really what you were about?
Well, I had so many expressions of gratitude for what I said from around the island. I just think we need certainty about all of this. People were frightened. A plain reading of the text in front of us is that £500 million could be spent on education, the economy in general, as well as on healthcare. What is all that about? We need a proper conversation, a proper national conversation, just like we did it back in 2014, 15 and 16 after the so-called CI65 report on introducing the Manx state pension. So I hope the outcome of my contribution today and other people's contributions is that we now will have that proper grown-up national conversation, and we will come to a rational way forward for the national insurance scheme, which is the bedrock of pensions and social security for future generations. It's not something to be drawn down now just because government's maxed out on its credit card and already spent all the other money it's got.
Quite alarmingly, the efforts that were made in the administration that ended in 2016 don't appear to have really halted the decline in the fund. Is more radical thinking actually going to be required? So, for example, the Treasury Minister's suggestion that the triple lock is revisited, which is, of course, code to say actually we'll get rid of it and replace it with something less generous. Is it really, have we got to the stage where that's necessary?
Well, it seems so. The government actuary from across did us a report in 2023. They considered the demography of the island, the age imbalance. They considered government's population plans inside the island plan and what that might mean. So we have data there. The report today was inadequate. I called on the Treasury Minister and Council Ministers to inform the national conversation with the public, just like we were informed back in 2014-15. Mr Tier, Mr Robert Shaw, other ministers went round the island with a new gadget, a new device that Mr Robert Shaw had purchased, asking people to choose between various options, and those options were costed, and they understood what the future would look like after making those choices, and that's what we need now. I said it was the Treasury Minister's promised a further report before the budget in February. I can't see how he's going to achieve that, and I gave him the chance to be a bit more explicit about the timetable, but currently we're promised a further report before the budget. Let's see if we get one, but certainly all the options should need to be on the table, and people of every generation, whether you're 21 and just starting work, or 16 and just starting work, or whether you're just 67 and coming up to retirement, we need to be involved, and everybody in between, in that discussion about how the National Insurance Fund supports the National Insurance Scheme, which is about social security, pensions, support for healthcare.
The purpose of the debate, according to the Treasury Minister, was to elicit views from members, and certainly he got those views. It is fair to say that, well, Mr Speaker, the former Treasury Minister, Mr Ashford, were pretty clear that using the National Insurance Fund, even investing it in the local economy, in the Manx economy, that was a no-no and a big risk. Why is it such a big risk, do you think, to invest in the Manx economy? And indeed, do you think it's a big risk?
I do, very much so, and I explained that very clearly. I think Mr Hooper only got 5 people, including himself, voting for his proposal, which explicitly talked about investing the National Insurance Fund in housing and wind farms, is what he said. Basically, I explained very clearly that what we need inside the fund is secure investments with a return that's nearly guaranteed. That's not what we would have in either of the 2 investments that he identified, because social housing relies on a deficiency payment, and wind farms have a subsidy at the moment from the customers who purchase electricity from those wind farms. There's a significant problem in the island, which is we don't have institutional investment here. That's the problem we should be trying to fix. There's a problem that we don't have liquidity around investments made in the island, and that's why we're not in the universe of the big funds across for mainstream investments. We need to fix those problems. We don't need to take money from our national funds to artificially make investments. That's been the ruin of many an island before us, and we don't want to go down that route.
That was Douglas Central MHK Chris Thomas, and finally Jason Moorhouse. you had several questions. You've also contributed to a number of the debates. In particular, I mean, you had questions, I think, to the social care minister, which of course is the chief minister at the time of recording, at least. What were you particularly looking for?
I was actually trying to find out, in terms of clarity, what was happening with the divide that seems to have arisen between the Council of Ministers, the Chief Minister, and Manx Care in terms of what cuts will now go forward. The Chief Minister and Comey said that certain cuts would not be taken forward, but on the list that he was referring to, there were certain positives. So I did try and get clarity in terms of, was it all the list or was it just a certain number of items? And there didn't seem to be the level of clarity that I had hoped for. So that was a concern. Also, with regard to one of the items that was on the list that the Chief Minister said was continuing the Cooth and Quell, there's a massive question mark in terms of Manx Care has said the contract's come to an end, this is ending, but the Chief Minister said it's continuing. So it's presumably a new contract on new terms, and who knows for how long it will go on. So that was kind of an interesting answer, but it presented more questions than final solutions and ideas. So slightly concerning, really, that.
And you had various other questions. I think, did you have questions about the in relation to the energy strategy, or was it just comments on that?
Yeah, I did make reference to it. It was really looking at the emphasis on renewables and a really, really positive, glowing emphasis on renewables, which went way, way beyond what even the MUA was saying. You know, there's this emphasis on solar and this movement, and there was still that impression that we're going to have a comprehensive strategy with regard to solar. And in fact, in response to my question last week, where the chair said, well, we're going to actually put several of the solar devices on the roof of the NSC, which has left us wondering, is it actually capable of holding these devices? And given the nature of the roof, are they going to actually create more problems than benefits? So that was an interesting one. And also, in terms of the timetable going forward for the turbines, the report seemed to be much more favourable in terms of what would happen when. And when I asked the minister about this, she kind of referred me back to the Manx Utilities and said, you know, they've got the up-to-date information. So, yeah, their website's tending to suggest that things are going to happen at a slightly slower rate than the document presented by DEFRA was implying. So, yeah.
I mean, there's an energy board that meets regularly. You would hope that the people who sit on that board update each other as to what the likely prospects are. So how could you have, on the one hand, the energy strategy saying one thing and the MUA saying, well, actually, maybe that's a bit overly optimistic?
That's it, and it really didn't leave me quite concerned. And also there was a mass gap in terms of no reference at all to Crogger. And it's one of those kind of key areas that if it does come along, it could be transformational. But to have a key document of that kind and have no reference when the previous documentation has suggested that's going to be a key part of the strategy going forward, it seemed quite an interesting move. So just in terms of what was on the table, it didn't kind of align with what many of us were expecting, and the minister did her best to reassure us, but you know, there's still questions to be asked with regard to that.
And in terms of then the other business, I think you had some comments in relation to the National Insurance Fund discussion.
It was an interesting debate, and most of us did contribute. In terms of my feelings, it is something that has got to be looked at. I was slightly concerned that Laurie Hooper's amendment was going far too far and raised many additional possibilities which at this time could have created more issues. It's going to be interesting to see what form the consultation takes. The Treasury Minister did give the impression there are going to be lots more opportunities to talk and contribute and share our thoughts. So if there is going to be any real movement before the next budget, we need to get going because, you know, we're only weeks away from that. So, yeah, it was a positive debate, and, yeah, there's definitely movement in that area, but there has got to be movement in that area.
Are you effectively acknowledging, like I think a number of people are now, that it's almost inevitable that the triple lock pensions promise will have to go, and a different mechanism found if the fund is to become sustainable?
It's going to be a challenge, that one. It's kind of a lot of people's best friend, and they get a lot of security and reassurance that has helped them in the past, and to actually set this point that's out, it can't be considered, is going to be a brave thing to say. But given the financial challenges that are existing and the additional ones on the horizon, there are certainly no guarantees, and it's going to have to be looked at really carefully in the coming days and weeks.
But I mean, you famously you are trained in economics, so you kind of get where we're at with the fund. The reports are very clear. If the projections are correct and they continue to be as bleak as the current situation, something has to be done.
Oh, definitely. And I think there was a real realism in the debate that, we couldn't stand and defend something that has to be really considered and looked at again. And, within the constituency, there are a lot of people who depend on their pension rising every year and rising by a good proportion to ensure that they keep up with price and continue to buy the things that they need to live. So, we look at this, but we're also aware that for some people it's crucial. It was interesting that some of the key ministers did make that reference to the actual needs of some people in the community, and they were being considered and thought about. So, yeah, we've got a realism and awareness of what's happening and what needs to be done, but it's not going to be easy.
And that was Arbury, Castletown and Maloo MHK Jason Moorhouse. So what do you think? Are you confident that our children are receiving a top-quality education? Is the post office providing the service you expect? And what about pensions and the National Insurance Fund? Are we any closer to answers? Will Tynwald take the bold steps necessary to ensure the long-term sustainability of the fund, despite the likely unpopularity of those decisions? For now, though, I'm Phil Gaughan. Guramayo, thanks for listening.